The following case is about a man called Peter Avery, who was born in Derby, England, on May the 15th, 1923. In World War II, Peter Avery served in the Royal Indian Navy and after the war attended the University of London, where he graduated in 1949 with a degree in Arabic and Persian languages. After university, Peter Avery became employed as the training manager for Arabic and Persian languages for the Anglo-Iranian Oil Company, and was stationed in the city of Abadan in the southwest of Iran. After his assignment at Abadan and the surrounding oil fields, where he worked from 1949 to 1950, he returned to England, where he became manager of the company's London office. A man by the name of John Evans then approached the organisation, telling them that he planned to travel to Iran and needed an interpreter. So Peter Avery was assigned the job to assist Mr. Evans on his trip to Isfahan in central Iran. Peter was overjoyed at the prospect he had been assigned to, as it would give him a chance to see more of Iran, as it had previously been restricted to Abadan and the surrounding areas. When Peter Avery and John Evans arrived in Isfahan, the following morning they had breakfast where Peter outlined to John Evans the route they would be taking from their hotel to the city's bazaar. Then Maidan-e-Shah and a public square built by Shah Abbas in the late 16th century. John Evans was amazed at Peter Avery's detailed knowledge of the streets of Isfahan, given the facts that he'd never been there in his life. Peter was actually surprised himself, as he seemed to know the way to the various locations in the city without the use of a map or guidebook. He just seemed to know the way. How was he able to do that? As the men were walking along the various streets, Peter's directions were extremely accurate as he led John Evans through the streets of Isfahan to the bazaar and Maidan-e-Shah. The final location that Peter Avery took John Evans to that morning was a place called Madrasa Maidan-e-Shah, which was a theological complex built by Shah Sultan Hussein in 1706 that he dedicated to his mother. In the garden of the complex was a blue dome mosque, and the moment the two men walked into the courtyard, Peter Avery became extremely emotional and burst into uncontrollable sobbing and had an overwhelming feeling that he'd come home. He sat on the side of a pond while John Evans decided to leave him by himself, as you could plainly see that he was very emotional on arriving there. After composing himself, he again met up with John Evans, where both men remained quiet, with Peter Avery feeling embarrassed by his sudden emotional outburst, but at the same time, John Evans was surprisingly understanding about the incident. That morning, Peter Avery had felt a strange familiarity with the city and its surrounding geography, yet it was a place that he had never ever visited before. However, it was not the first time that Peter Avery had experienced what seemed to be a previous life in Iran and that part of the world. In 1944, when Peter was 21 and serving in the Royal Indian Navy during World War II, an Indian officer on the ship had invited Peter to visit his family, who lived in Lahore, which is now part of Pakistan. The officer knew of Peter's interest in Islamic literature and culture and wanted Peter to meet his father, Khan Bahadur Muhammad Shafti, who lectured on Asian studies and was a scholar of Islamic history. In Lahore, they visited the Shalimar Bagh, a garden complex built by the Islamic Mughal emperors. Peter was accompanied by his friend's father, Shafi. Peter had never been to Shalimar Bagh before and knew nothing of its layout. Peter and Mr. Shafi entered the building through a doorway in a surrounding wall, and Peter somehow knew that this was not the original entrance. He told Mr. Shafi that the original doorway was in the wall opposite them on the other side of the enclosure. Mr. Shafi told Peter that he was correct. Peter also said that the small building in the centre of the garden was not part of the original design. Mr. Shafi verified his statement and said that the small building was originally part of an emperor's tomb complex and was moved to Ranjit Singh, a Sikh who ruled Lahore from 1799 to 1839. If Peter Avery had lived a past life where he appeared to be familiar with Shalimar Bagh, he must have lived there before 1799, before the small building was moved there. Peter Avery said that he'd had a sense of déjà vu on arriving at Shalimar Bagh in Lahore and had a feeling he'd been there before and knew the place intimately. He sensed he was returning and said that it felt like it had once been a home. But the feeling in Shalimar was nowhere near as emotional or intense as when he arrived in Madrasa in Isfahan along with his client John Evans. Had Peter Avery somehow remembered a past life or lives in Iran and Pakistan? From 1958 to 1990, Peter Avery was a university lecturer in Persian Studies at Cambridge University, and then continued as a Fellow of King's College, Cambridge, becoming a famous scholar of Persian Studies. Peter Avery is well known for his translations of Persian poets Hafiz and Omar Khayyam, and has written extensively on the history of Iran from its earliest origins to the present. Did Peter Avery's passion for Persia and Islamic studies come from a previous incarnation, as he had grown up in a totally different culture in England in a Christian environment? So where did he get his deep knowledge of the streets of Isfahan in Iran, along with the flood of emotions that he'd experienced in Madrasa Maida el-Shah in Isfahan, Iran? Unlike many other cases where people not only knew their environment they were visiting, but had remembered their names and the names of people around them, which could then be tracked down on records for proof of their past life. Unfortunately, Peter Avery was unable to remember any names of people from his past life, or for that matter, did not even remember his own name from his past life in Iran and Pakistan, so nothing could be historically validated. Yet he had an amazing knowledge of geographical locations, even though he had not previously visited in his current incarnation. Yet he was adamant that he did not gain any information through maps or books. Why did he experience a flood of emotions in Madrasa Maida el-Shah in Isfahan, Iran, with the overwhelming feeling that it seemed to have geographic memory? Was it the fact that he had once lived a life or lived in those locations? The reason he became fluent in Persian and would later become a well-known scholar in Persian and Islamic studies? Did his talent for the Persian language and love of Persian and Islamic literature and culture really stem from a past life in Iran? Peter Avery died on October 6, 2008 in England.